In November 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter peered through a small hole into a tomb that had remained sealed for over 3,000 years. When asked what he could see, Carter famously replied, "Wonderful things." What he had discovered was the intact tomb of Tutankhamun, one of the greatest archaeological finds in human history. However, within months of this momentous discovery, a series of mysterious deaths would begin to unfold, giving birth to one of the most enduring legends of the 20th century, the Curse of the Pharaohs. The notion that ancient Egyptian tombs carried deadly curses was not entirely new. Hieroglyphic inscriptions often contained warnings to potential tomb robbers, threatening divine retribution for disturbing the eternal rest of the pharaohs. But what happened following the opening of King Tut's tomb transformed these ancient threats from mere superstition into what many believed was terrifying reality. The first and most prominent victim was Lord Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who had financed Carter's excavation. Just 5 months after the tomb's discovery, Carnarvon died in Cairo under circumstances that seemed almost supernaturally ominous. On April 5, 1923, he succumbed to pneumonia following complications from an infected mosquito bite. What made his death particularly unsettling was the timing and the strange events that allegedly accompanied it. Reports claimed that at the exact moment of his death, all the lights in Cairo mysteriously went out. Even more bizarre, back at his estate in England, his beloved dog was said to have howled and died at precisely the same time. But Carnarvon's death was only the beginning. Within 7 years of the tomb's opening, 22 people connected to the excavation had died under circumstances that ranged from suspicious to downright inexplicable. Each death seemed to add another layer to the growing legend of the pharaoh's supernatural vengeance. Arthur Mace, the American archaeologist who had actually helped Carter break down the sealed doorway to the tomb, died in 1928 from a mysterious illness that left doctors baffled. His health had deteriorated rapidly after the excavation, and no medical explanation could be found for his decline. George J. Gould, a wealthy American financier who visited the tomb, developed a fever immediately after his visit and died within 24 hours. The speed of his demise shocked even experienced physicians. Perhaps most chilling was the fate of Hugh Evelyn White, a British archaeologist who had worked on the excavation. Before taking his own life, he left a haunting message: "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear." His suicide note suggested that he genuinely believed supernatural forces were pursuing him, making his death a tragic testament to the psychological power of the curse legend. The deaths continued with disturbing regularity. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, who X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died suddenly and inexplicably soon after. Arthur Cruttendon Mace's assistant fell into a coma shortly after entering the tomb and never recovered. Even those with more distant connections seemed vulnerable. Lord Carnarvon's half-brother died unexpectedly, as did several other visitors and researchers associated with the site. The media of the time seized upon these deaths with sensationalistic fervor. Newspaper headlines around the world proclaimed the reality of the pharaoh's curse, and public fascination with the supernatural explanation grew to extraordinary proportions. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes and a prominent believer in the supernatural, publicly endorsed the curse theory, lending it intellectual credibility that fueled public belief. However, as decades passed and scientific scrutiny intensified, alternative explanations began to emerge. Some researchers proposed that the deaths might have resulted from exposure to toxic molds or bacteria that had accumulated in the sealed tomb over millennia. The confined, humid environment could have harbored dangerous pathogens that proved fatal to those with compromised immune systems or underlying health conditions. Statistical analysis also began to challenge the curse narrative. When researchers examined the death rates of those connected to the excavation compared to similar populations, they found that the mortality rates were not significantly higher than expected. Howard Carter himself, who had the most extensive exposure to the tomb, lived for 17 more years after the discovery, dying peacefully in 1939 at the age of 64. Yet the scientific explanations, while rational, could not entirely dispel the mystery. The concentration of deaths, their often sudden and inexplicable nature, and the psychological impact on those involved created a perfect storm of circumstances that continues to fascinate historians and the public alike. The curse of the Pharaohs represents more than just a collection of coincidental deaths. It reflects humanity's eternal struggle between rational thought and supernatural belief, between scientific inquiry and ancient mysticism. Whether the result of toxic exposure, statistical coincidence, or psychological suggestion, the deaths that followed the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb created a legend that continues to capture imaginations more than a century later. The curse reminds us that even in our modern scientific age, there remain mysteries that resist easy explanation. And sometimes, the most compelling stories emerge from the intersection of remarkable discoveries and inexplicable events. In disturbing the eternal rest of the boy king, perhaps humanity discovered something far more unsettling than golden treasures: the limits of our understanding of life, death, and the forces that govern both.